Danko Vasović, investigative journalist and filmmaker, will be joining us just shortly. A little problem. There we go. Danko, can you hear us? Can you hear us? No. Can you hear us, Danko? No, he's got to go out and come back in. Yeah, he's not being able to hear. Anyway, so basically we wanted to discuss the American presidential elections, which affects the entire world, not just America. And I really feel that we can help out even Americans, not just American Serbs, on this issue, because they talk about having First Amendment rights, but I don't see that they speak so freely and directly as we Serbs do, who don't have a hair on our tongue, as we say. Nemamo dlaku na jeziku. So I just wanted to start off with maybe a big picture with no details right now. We'll get into that. Which is the better candidate and why is the other inferior? And will it make a difference who wins and why? Why don't we start off with John Bosnitch? Take it away.
All right. Well, I certainly cannot claim to be a neutral observer. I'm a strong supporter of Donald J. Trump, which is a tough position to hold up here in Canada, where I am now, because the vast majority of Canadians are strongly opposed to Donald J. Trump and very much emotionally opposed. I believe that this is the result of a very extended and extremely professionally run public demonization campaign run by the opponents of Donald J. Trump and the ideas that he represents: the end of the wars for profit, the end of an imperialistic America and more of a republic of America, the refocusing of American capital on America, the reinvestment of American money in America rather than outside of America, the raising of the standards of living of every American, not just the rich, the raising of employment, the development of new industries. His tie-up with Elon Musk is, I mean, for somebody like me, I studied engineering. I'm a very technically oriented person. I'm a very politically active person. This combination of Elon Musk is like a dream combination. It's the nexus of advanced technology with patriotism, with free enterprise, with competition, with freedom of speech, and a doggedness of defense of the true values of the American Republic in a manner that reminds me of the old yellow flag that Americans carried with the curled rattlesnake that says, "Don't tread on me." And that represents a homeland-oriented view. Don't tread on me. I'm not going to make an empire. I'm not going to invade your country. Don't tread on me. That's what I see in the combination of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And they're not just the only players in this now. This is a combination that brings people whose very family name defines the Democratic Party. RFK Jr. running in support of Donald J. Trump, Republican. What could possibly have caused this to happen? Well, we know what caused it to happen. A fake medical dictatorship that killed hundreds of thousands of people and that prescribed measures that they knew were completely and totally ineffective. I, for example, have two sons.
John, if we can,
yeah,
if we can go into more details, like I say, later. Right now, I just really wanted to get a really raw and real take on yours. Who is the better candidate, and why is the other inferior?
On all of these issues. Yeah, on all of these issues that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
Donald Trump holds the more logical, the more productive, the more American point of view. And I think that given a choice between Donald Trump and the change that Kamala Harris would represent, a change that contradicts many traditional American concepts and ideas of activity, and that basically demonstrates that she's a pawn of the military industrial complex, of the,
Absolutely.
I now call it the military industrial media complex. Because what's happening now is instead of fighting wars on the battlefield, they're fought in the information space. Trump
Great.
is
Let's
the
hear from
only
Danko. And yes, sorry. I want to hear everything you have to say. I just want everyone to bounce off of each other, and then we can get into all the details. I want to hear everything you have to say because you've got a great mind there. Danko, can you hear us now? Are you back? I think he's still frozen there.
No, he's not frozen. He just, for some reason, he do not hear. So I will text him, if he can put some headsets or something like that. And pretty much
I had to do the same. I had to do the same to hear you guys better as well. He's going to need to do something like that. Thank you so much, Zoranet. Great. Right. So we'll hear from Danko when he comes right back. Awesome. John, I totally agree with you. In fact, I really want to be brutally honest. My candidate was RFK Jr. All right. I love the guy. He's such a Christian, so polished, so everything. But the Democratic Party was suing him left, right, and center in every state. He just couldn't get ahead. The only person that has plowed through to such an extent to get to where he is Donald Trump. So there is no other candidate. I absolutely agree with you, John. In fact, nobody said it, but I totally believe and see prophetically she is the Democratic Party's Manchurian candidate. She is an Illuminati mind-controlled slave, MK Ultra, absolutely all the way. Did you notice how her cackle, her laugh, all of a sudden stopped when they just programmed her to stop? It's so bizarre. It's so flabbergasting, gobsmacking, as the Brits would say. How do you stop a laugh like that and all of a sudden not use it anymore? So it was bogus from the very beginning. Back to you, John.
I have to say that I do have some hesitation in taking Kamala Harris at face value. Now, that being said, I also have to, as a journalist, as a professional journalist, I have to take Donald Trump and analyze him at face value too. There's no such thing as a 100% perfectly honest politician. They don't exist. So the question is, who is closer to the ideal that we're seeking as an individual? Who is more representative of a future that will allow America to retain the good things that it once had, that many of us loved before it became the warmonger empire that it is today? This is a this is an election that decides the fate of the republic. It's also, I mean, to put it in layman's terms, in American teenager terms, it's like Star Wars, and Donald Trump is one of the rebels trying to stop the empire run by the emperor and run by his warmonger Darth Vaders and ministers of defense. And this is what it is. It's the reality has come to mimic the picture that Hollywood painted of our future.
Bravo, John. Let's see if Danko's back. Danko, can you hear us? He's got to go out and come back in then. He's just not hearing anything. Yeah. So basically, so since we are for Trump, why don't we delve into now the reasons why we're not for Kamala and dissect that, shall we? Zoranet, do you want to show us maybe the first clip? We can cover maybe some of Kamala's gas, bird salad. I think that.
No, I don't have any clips, due to pretty much what's the name, our guest, that's supposed to join us. That's Obrad Kesić, and we are trying pretty much to establish this, call it, just discussion in sense, what's going on, what are we expecting, and what are we looking at, so provoking, the issue. We might be putting, our guest in problem, because he's an ambassador and he doesn't need, to kind of side either way. But the whole idea is expressing our own sentiment, about the election and everything else. Tomorrow we can go with those clips, we can discuss them, and we can do that. But they're pretty much known. As we know by now, everybody that wants to be involved in this election, pretty much, it's either picked up the side or not pick up the side. From my standpoint, as independent, and independent means, that do not belong to either party and that like to discuss issues, I'm kind of open, to hear both sides and the arguments in order to kind of understand what's at stake and where it's going, So me from this production of, call it, Diaspora Broadcast Network and Power of Diaspora, I think that the reason why we're doing this, actually I made a little intro, which I wanted to kind of put in before that. Maybe that would be the best kind of explain. So let's kind of hear it, where I'm at, which actually I kind of try to present you, but you just jump in.
Sure.
Hello, welcome to this panel. Greetings from Los Angeles. And are we going to start from history or future? Definitely history define our future, and some mistakes seems to be repeated. We have expectation according to our beliefs who should be a new leader in United States that is no longer united. We, from our point, as immigrants, second generation, definitely of these great nations, we are concerned. And before I introduce you with the organizer of this panel, just to mention a reason why we are doing this in English tongue. We are part of the community that does not speak Serbian, and we do engage with our friends, co-workers, and participate in this political discussion. The panel is for their viewing as well. America is a democratic country as long as there is a dialogue, trust in elected processes, and giving opportunity elected leader to do his or her job. Or that's no longer the case. Anyway, from Jordan or Belgrade, I have no idea where she is, Angelina Lazar, spiritual political advisor to UN Peacemaker and producer of this panel. Hello, thank you for doing this. So that was the intro, pretty much the way I wanted to start this production and to kind of address why we are speaking English, because we have our friends, we have our neighbors. People are asking us, what's our point of view? What are we looking at? From my experience, I notice... Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not only for that reason, it's to avoid having people be tortured by my Serbian. So let's be.
As I said, if we're gonna pretend that we have a democracy, that means that we have a dialogue. If we have a dialogue, if better wins, are we gonna accept that win, and are we gonna let him kind of rule? That didn't happen with Trump won because it took him 2 years to defend himself, from attacks from Democrats. That's the person who was twice basically almost assassinated. He was prosecuted from Department of Justice, all other people, and he's pretty much still out there and fighting his battle. So what we have here, either he gonna win or lose, but what we're gonna get, on Wednesday and Thursday, it is my concern. And from that standpoint, this discussion, to me, it's more interesting because I don't think so, that my vote plus or minus will decide as much as we look into it, what we can do in order to present our case in supporting one or the other, or supporting the issues that they're promoting and the belief that they are projecting to us that we think, that because, John, by my standard, none of the presidents in my 40 years being in the United States did anything for me. And most of them failed to fulfill their promises, whether it's too short term or it's just populism, that pretty much works today. So should I trust them? Should I kind of take them for their words and let them kind of manipulate me in sense, that I believe them and they don't deliver? That's pretty much my question whenever they raise any type of issue, either party, either Democratic or Republican. That would be like my kind of topic of interest.
So,
Go.
Well,
should
I
make
think
a
that,
response to that?
yeah, Trump. Go ahead, John.
I think that I am a political commentator, and I've studied political science. I've graduated in university in political science, but I see our responsibility to participate in public affairs as going beyond politics. I believe that a failure to get directly involved in politics means that it's a failure to participate fully in the society. And in fact, by not participating fully in the society, you are ostracizing yourself, and you're also negating your own views by not propagating them. So I've always been active in society. So, I mean, literally from junior high school through high school, I was a student union leader through university, and I can't imagine not being proactive. So for me, if I hear people speaking and saying that we all agree that the only possible candidate who is compatible with Serbian interests in Serbia, and more importantly, compatible with Serbians in America, is Donald J. Trump. So if we can,
And not
quickly
only
come
just with
to,
Serbians. Yeah, but
yes,
for
yes,
the world, I would say.
yeah, what I'm trying to make is the point that if we all agree, or if we overwhelmingly agree that this is the situation, then we should not waste too much more time debating why we disapprove of Kamala Harris, because I think that's pretty obvious. But I think that you who are based more there should speak more to the criticisms of Kamala Harris. The one big criticism I have of Kamala Harris is a historic one, that Kamala Harris, as a prosecutor in California, was responsible for an extremely high rate of conviction of Black Californians for cannabis possession, cannabis use. I mean, crimes that are today not crimes. And those persons'
And it's legal there in
destroyed.
California.
Yeah. Okay, so these are lives that were destroyed by her. And the attempt to get her elected with another dose of mandatory injection of Democratic Party identity politics. Now we've got a woman who, that's okay, she has to be a woman, that's fine. And then the next, she's Black and she's Indian. And
But she's not
at
Black.
the same time, no, but what you understand that the identity of the candidate should not be as important as the concepts and the ideas that the candidate represents. And so
Sure.
that is not the case with the Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris, because I can tell you that I have yet, listen to this, I have yet to meet any person who can tell me 10 concepts that Kamala Harris stands for. Now, if you cannot tell me 10 basic ideas that your president, your preferred president, represents and is being elected to institute and to fight for and to prevail in bringing to the American public. If you can't tell me the 10 main things that your candidate for president represents, then you don't know who your candidate for president is. You do not know what he or she wants, and you shouldn't actually be voting. That's
true. She's basically just a front. Let's do your point right after that. Danko, if you can hear us, chime in. Otherwise, you got to go out and come back in. I think that's what needs to happen. Can you click him off and then leave him a message and let him know he's got
I already did.
I
already did. He has
right.
issue with his phone and equipment, and obviously, you know, three of us, I never had that before, and I cannot deal with him at this time in order to help him. I don't know how to help him.
Right.
Because, you know, I already texted him, so I told him, you know, pretty much, you know, to do what he can do.
Here, I've got a good idea. How long is this discussion planned to go on?
We can go as long as we can. You know, it really doesn't matter.
Okay,
you know,
so
1 to 2 hours.
Yeah.
My suggestion, Danko, are you hearing us? Just nod your head if you are.
No.
He's not.
I have no even idea why he's seeing us.
So we need to click him off. We need to click him off and then just bring him back another day, because we've got Ambassador Obrad Kesić coming in from the top of the hour. So we need to clear that.
I'm not in Belgrade, so I can't call Danko on his telephone.
Again, I send him a message, you know, what to do, but obviously he's not able to do it, you know, so here we are.
Perfect. You know, okay, so I wanted to say about Kamala Harris, so we can play off of each other and not just hold a monologue, because I want to hear from others as well what they think, and do we agree with each other, and to really build those concepts. You know, she's just a front, John. That's the thing. It's the military-industrial complex behind her, the reptilians, the deep state. She doesn't represent anything. She's like, even the Russians call her, an empty vessel or empty suit. She doesn't have any policies, absolutely. That's why it's all word salad and cackles and trying to make herself seem joyous, like she's a more how do you say, collegial candidate. I mean, it's just all nonsense. It's rubbish. They're really playing with the American minds. Mm-hmm.
I agree, but you know, as a journalist who tries to present the full picture of all sides, what would really be good in these last couple of days of the campaign, if you want to have a November surprise, I would like somebody to come forward with some actual puppet strings between the military-industrial complex and the media complex and Kamala Harris personally. I know that those things exist. I've heard lots of rumors about them, and as a journalist, I've pressed my sources to come forward with these things. I would really, really, really like to see some documentary support for what we all know from circumstantial evidence to be true. That she is the preferred military, industrial, media, entertainment complex's candidate. This is transparent. But to be
I think the best person... Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the best person who speaks about her really is Judge Joe Brown, who knows her so well, who speaks about her dodgy past. I chose some clips we can show next day there about her, even with Diddy. She was his girlfriend, like literally really bad stuff, because basically those are all, God help them, sex slaves who have been with him, and basically her sleeping her way to the top. He called her literally a hooker, a prostitute. Yeah,
I'm not overly concerned about that whole line of. I think there are substantive reasons why Kamala Harris is totally unacceptable as president, and if we talk about the personality or character flaws, then we're entering the same kind of territory that the opponents of Trump inhabit. And that's the territory of people who have no substantive reason to oppose Trump's policies, but they just don't like his personality. They don't like the New York businessman, real estate mogul that he is. Well, you know, unfortunately, you can't always get what you want. So democracy and the choice between available candidates gives you, in America, two choices. You
Right.
can vote for this one or you can vote for this one. And if you vote for any other one, you have thrown your vote away, gone.
Away. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if it's an election that polarizes people, which it has to do by definition, I'm hoping that the traditional family-oriented work and get paid for your work, free speech, pioneerism, inventiveness of Elon Musk mixed with all of that, I'm hoping that with the IT revolution and with the increased education level of many Americans, I'm hoping that the tide is going to shift away from the military-industrial complex. I'm hoping
Yeah,
that
I believe
young,
so too.
educated people are going to say no to that. And if they
Right.
do,
And I think
they will be the people who win the election for Trump.
Right. And I think really honestly that prayer helps here a lot with the evangelicals, the Christians. Prayer does affect miracles. So, you know, a lot of people are so sarcastic and believe that it doesn't matter who wins, which way it goes, it's the deep state. But honestly, when we have and we plow through and we really fight for our rights, like John was talking about, that's a real democracy. We really need to be activists. Absolutely. I always was all my life as well. We need to have a good, healthy dose of self-esteem to believe that our vote counts and what we do and what we say counts. And this is why we're doing this podcast. I think it's really essential. In fact, I think that we can really help other Americans, not just American Serbs, to cast their vote properly. Because I don't see people speaking as openly as we do, as we Serbs are known to do, and that's really, really essential.
You know,
So,
this is
mhm.
Angelina, I would say this is a product of at least two factors. Outspokenness is a thing that in the past in Yugoslavia and in Serbia could get a person in trouble. That's number one.
Right.
And number two, outspokenness as a newcomer to a new society is something that can get you in trouble in the new society. So we have a situation where quite a few, I'm not saying all, but quite a few Serbs in America feel that they cannot be outspoken because they're not as apple pie and hot dog as the next American. That's how I would say it. And we aren't. Thank goodness. I prefer Pljeskavica and, Žito or something Serbian. I'm very, very happy with the Serbian diet that I've adopted since leaving Canada, leaving Japan, and moving to Serbia. I actually eat good food. I'm healthy.
Yeah.
I feel great. It's
By the way,
this is
for our listeners, both John and I did leave Canada and chose to live in Serbia, and I think that speaks volumes about really, it's true what you're saying, but still I feel there's greater freedom in Serbia, John. Where we really fight for our rights. We're really much more actively involved in the sociopolity of Serbia. Mm-hmm.
The average individual in Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my case is impossible in America. I was not born in Serbia. I speak the language very poorly, and yet my views have qualified me to be featured in public debates, media, television, radio for years in Serbia, because I have some views that some Serbs seem to think are interesting, at least. This possibility for a person not born in America requires you to be a billionaire like Elon Musk. That's how a person not born in America can get top visibility in America. In Serbia, a person with not much money who doesn't speak the language properly but has some ideas that are of interest to some people can get in the national and local media. And that shows
Great point.
an openness in Serbia which
Mm-hmm.
exceeds the openness that we're taught to believe exists in the West.
Very good. So you're saying there's greater democracy in Serbia than there is in America. And I see that becoming more totalitarian with that Democratic Party.
Look, Serbia is a multi-party democracy. America is not. America is a duopoly. What is a duopoly? Well, it's the takes two to tango version of a monopoly. A monopoly is the rule by one party, by one group. Well, it's a duopoly. There are two sets of funders in America. There are two sets of moderate views, moderately right, moderately left. And that's what their political system is. There is some chatter in the background and some murmur in the building, in the frame, but that's it. There's no other political view. And Serbia, there's everything from the far left to the far right to the middle to the religious to the conservative to the liberal. All parties are represented in Serbia, and due to the use of proportional representation for half of the seats in Serbia, all parties are represented in the parliament. There's no chance that all of the major parties in America can ever be represented in Congress. So they have an exclusionary, monopolistic political system that forces you to choose between two candidates. And in that choice, there's either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. So for people like myself, I'm not too interested in wasting much more time talking about why Donald Trump is better for democracy and for peace in the world and for international cooperation than Kamala Harris. And what I'm more interested in doing is talking about how you and I and anybody else who's on this call can encourage people who are Serbs in America and Serbian voters in America to help Donald Trump win. And what I propose is very simple. 1 + 1. You must, if you can, bring one ethnic Serbian American to vote, who you hopefully know supports Donald Trump. And you must go among your non-ethnic Serbian friends in America and bring one of them to vote for Donald Trump.
Yep, that would be helpful. Danko, can you hear us now?
You will have tripled your vote. You will have tripled your vote. And there are 1 million or 1.5 million Serbs in America. And if you triple your vote of 1.5 million, 1 million are voters, if they're residents and citizens. So there's 1 million Serbian voters. And if you bring one other Serbian voter who is not going to vote, that means a Serb related or half Serbian or Greek friend or Russian, bring them and bring one English American, one American American, one French American, whatever. Doesn't matter, but not from our community.
Good idea.
You get three of them to the ballot. You will decide the election. Those 3 million votes will decide who wins the election.
Brilliant, John. Hey, Danko, can we hear from you? You can hear us now?
Yes, I hear you perfectly. Hello, everybody.
Oh, now we can hear you. There he is.
That's good.
Okay, Danko.
Just heard what John said. And I can say that I fully agree. That's the way we should and everybody should do. And it's much better than to bring the immigrants from Mexico and to have criminals and smugglers to vote for Democrats. That's what I'm saying. That's why I think from the very beginning, this is not an honest elections because too many immigrants got green card to vote.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Illegal. Who came in illegally with no process whatsoever. And this is a big trick of the corrupt Democrats, what they're doing. And they're busing them to the swing states in order for them to turn blue. They are beyond corrupt. That's election interference. Seriously.
I'm absolutely convinced it was done premeditatedly with intention.
Absolutely.
So 100% criminal people with the background, smugglers, criminals, even I'm sure some of them who were murderers go several years, even a right citizenship with a right to take part in election and to get, and of course all votes goes to Democrats, the green light for them to end states.
Yeah. Very serious. In fact, Elon Musk speaks about this as well, how it is a crime. When they go to vote in the state of California, where they have the greatest number of Americans, you cannot show your ID. They must not even ask for your ID. So they want all those illegal migrants to be voting for Democrats because Democrats let them in. That's insane. Donald Trump really needs to sue them over that.
That's totally unacceptable. 100% unacceptable.
Although there is the possibility that I should just fly down there to vote myself then. If anybody can vote, I'll go. I'd be happy to go to America and vote for Donald Trump.
Me too. I lived in America several years.
That would be a
right,
good
right. And I couldn't fathom
from a foreign country and vote for Donald Trump to show what the other side is able to do.
Right. I lived there for several years, and I couldn't fathom that I would be given the opportunity to vote. These coming from third world countries that are uneducated, and I was even studying political management and was so involved. It's absolutely ludicrous. Yeah, total corruption, totalitarian.
Angie, I fully agree with you, but listen, this is let's say a very pale attempt, because we are talking and we have in front of us organized systems with millions of people, millions of votes who will be in the game and on the table, who can even decide, because this is a neck-to-neck race to White House. 1% is a lot and can decide. And just imagine millions of
3 million votes. 3 million votes, that's what we should be able to deliver. 3 million.
Great, John. Yeah, smart. I like that. Yeah, Serbs should feel empowered with that suggestion. Absolutely, I love that, because maybe some of our Serbs don't speak English so well, so aren't following the news, so don't feel that they're really up on it. So our American Serbs can enlighten them who do speak English well, and go pick them up via car and bring them to the voting booth. That's great, John. Great tip. And that can decide the election. I love that tip. Sorry, Zorane, we got you back there, huh? Go for it. Oh no, we're not hearing Zoran. We're not hearing Zoran.
Okay. Since we solved the Danko's issue regarding video and audio, I just would like to ask him if he can lower a little bit volume, if he can hear, because there is basically feedback and kind of distort conversation. Right. And also if he can, turn that. Hold on, Danko. Listen, don't jump, because, we are not creating, good production. The other thing is what you need to do, if you can turn around, this phone because we see only half of your head. So I know that you're more prettier, and if you would kind of turn the phone horizontal, maybe you will get, 69 pictures. Here it is, also even... Okay, I'm gonna turn your volume up.
I'm gonna turn your volume up.
And you see, I'm coming back to us to our production.
I'm coming back to us to our production.
So you don't need to turn volume up to for all neighborhood, just for yourself. If you can lower it down so you can hear it.
Or use
absolutely.
headphones is better.
If you have a headset,
Right.
beautiful.
If you have a headset, beautiful.
I don't have.
Danko's with us another 10 minutes, and then we've got Ambassador Obrad Kesić coming in because we've got a stipulation of four speakers at once. All right.
Okay,
Great.
Danko, so pretty much we're going to have to give you the word so then you can speak so we don't have interruption. So please go ahead if you have pretty much your sentiment.
If you have pretty much your sentiment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, shall I repeat what I said? I don't
No,
know
we
if
did
you
hear
heard.
you. We did hear you.
No, we did hear you. We did hear you.
So my general sense is that I feel that this is not normal situation and normal election because many crooks, too many cheatings from the very start. If we located that there is millions of votes that will be on the table, it means from the very start, from the first second, these elections are not legitimate, are not correct. So I hope people in Republican Party understood this well. So this is a fight with no for the future of America. This is not only a race for White House. Satanic plan, and that's my feeling, stands behind this. The people who just want to take a powerful, the most important country in the world.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Danko. It is definitely satanic. I mean, they celebrate even Halloween in the White House. We've seen how they celebrate even now in Canada. My God, with witches in the UK, the West is really pushing a satanic agenda. It's so true, and you see it clearly through the Democratic Party, which has really become a democratic party. I must say. That is true, and people should be aware of that. That's why I love that Donald Trump allows the Christians to pray over him, and he's about pushing Christianity, and he's even speaking to the Christian lobby to be much more active, as John was saying, to be much more politically active and push their voices right through.
I do want to make a note here. You know, I was born and grew up here in Canada, where I am now. I'm in my hometown. And I was raised with all the standard North American traditions, and including Halloween, which I enjoyed as a child, wearing costumes and walking outside. I can assure you that no one of any person that I knew or went to school with or met had any satanic thoughts about Halloween. Halloween was getting a pillowcase from a pillow, putting on a plastic bag and some makeup, walking with your mother or your father 2 or 3 blocks down the street to the neighbors who you knew, because you mowed their lawn or you brought the newspaper to their house, and getting some chocolate from them and saying boo and making some jokes. And that this hallowed eve, that means holy evening, Sveti Veče, that's what hallowed eve is. It's that this precedes all the Day of the Dead, the memory of the dead, which is followed. So I know that the picture of Halloween and some of these things here in the West, the Christmas with Santa Claus, it looks fake, and it isn't in sync with the Bible. And of course, our Slavas aren't in sync with the Bible. There are no Slavas celebrated in the Bible. But each nation develops a tradition. There the only reason why I think a man like Donald Trump can still win in America is that one of the traditions in America, in addition to Santa Claus and Halloween and all of that, one of the traditions that still exists in America is Christianity. There's Protestant Christianity.
Well, even the founding fathers, excuse me, John,
and I think
even the founding fathers, I'm sorry, it's difficult to bounce off of you. Yeah.
Most practicing Christians, I think, are going to be voting for Donald J. Trump. And I think it's going to be an indicator of what kind of population America has. This could be the turning point in the population of America. I think it
absolutely, and I really want to springboard off what you're saying, John, so that this is not a monopoly here, right? But a democracy. But no, I have to say, with regards to Halloween, it is a night of witches, and it is satanic. It's just a lack of spiritual awareness. We too went Halloween trick-or-treating, and never realized that. Once we realized that as kids, we stopped going. So, but that's not the topic of conversation. But yes, the founding fathers were Christians, and they included Christian concepts within the U.S. Constitution. So it is a Christian nation, not as Barack Obama says, a Muslim nation. It is still a Christian nation, and Donald Trump does need to fight for that, and he is fighting for the Christians in America. Yeah, and for that reason, definitely to be president.
Yeah, actually, I should correct myself. It's a nation of faith. I respect the fact that the believing Muslims are voting for Donald Trump. That believing Jews are voting for Donald Trump, that believing Baptists are voting for Donald Trump. So let me correct myself. I speak as a Christian, of course, but I know Muslims, and I know Buddhists, and I know Jews who are all voting for Donald Trump. And part of the core of the reason why they're voting for him is because they believe in God, in whichever form they see God to take.
Okay, Danko wants to say something.
Yes, I want to say, I fully agree with what John said, but it's very important to make one distinction. Number one, when I said satanic plan, I was referring to the plan to bring illegal immigrants and criminal smugglers into the U.S. and to give them right to vote. I didn't refer to Halloween, which I like. That's number one. Number two, I fully agree that such America, Christian America, America who believes in God, stands behind Donald Trump. But, John, we are not talking about single cases. We are talking that is created within the U.S. incredible mess of people, non-educated, who has no college, who are not Christians, who just came to find the better life, who are hungry, and who even commit crimes. That's incredible. That is what I'm saying. So to vote for Trump means to fight for real America. If the another America, people who don't feel the America, who don't believe in America that it used to be, which is what Donald Trump said, I'll make America great again. It means to make America as it was, then it's all in vain. So it's not single case what you feel or believe or what you talk about, what at least majority, and that means at least 60% or of any issue. So that is what counts. Not single case, but 60% or even more.
Agreed.
And it is created now America, where incredible majority of the people who don't share a real values of America and Christianity takes part in the daily life of America. And that's reality. That's why America has changed, lost its values. lost its spirit.
Yep.
Because these new people have nothing to do with such America. We are talking about non-white Americans who even hate non-educated. You know how many of them is? And these immigrants, it's too much. It's too much. America is on the verge to lose its substance, essence.
Its soul.
Fundamentally.
Right.
It's soul. Right.
I just want to mention this too. It comes to me to state, like Israel, they consider is a Jewish nation, and everything caters to the Jews, not to the Muslims, Arab Muslims, the Christians, but to the Jews. So I don't think it's sinful to say that America is a Christian nation and should remain a Christian nation. It was founded upon Christian principles. You know, that doesn't exclude because there's nothing derogatory or there's no kind of racism or anything against Jews or Muslims or any other faith. But the fact that we're Christians, we shouldn't be afraid to say that we are or to hold back from that. That is all encompassing. It is loving thy neighbor. Absolutely. And I think that is the soul and essence of America, for sure. And that's something the UK has really, really lost. Yeah. The king even doesn't call it the Church of England anymore, but he calls it a community. So that church is gone. Yeah. And Donald Trump really realizes that as well. He understands how important Christianity is in bringing back religion to America, and states that very openly now. John wants to rebuttal that. I know that.
No, I generally I generally agree that he wants to return traditional values, and those traditional values in America created the powerhouse that America was before it became an empire after World War II, when it inherited the British Empire. There was an America that people saw as a beacon of freedom, and it had more freedom than many, many, many places. And that country has been kidnapped by an organized group of banksters, stock investors, militarists, and industrialists who know that the maximum profit you can make in any industry in America is to sell to the military-industrial complex, which will pay whatever you charge. And so the military-industrial complex has the smartest minds and creates this mess. And this is what has produced the phenomenon of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a phenomenon. He is a personalization in one man of a mass of people in America who do not want America to keep going down the empire road, and they want America to follow the advice of the first president, President George Washington, who warned the republic to stay a republic and to never mimic the empire of Great Britain, from which it had just liberated itself through a revolutionary war. That's the farewell message. Great. It's called the farewell address of the first president. And Donald Trump is answering it.
Right. It's the same kind of phenomenon as with Jesse Ventura when he won as governor of the state of Minnesota. Like, he blew them away. Like, 22 CIA agents came, surrounded him, were interrogating him afterwards. Like, how did he penetrate right through that military wall, that of the deep state? Exactly. Let's give Danko 1 to 2 minutes, because we got to then say goodbye to Danko and bring on Obrad Kesić. So let's hear some more thoughts for 1 to 2 minutes, Danko, and maybe we'll bring you on back another night. I don't think Danko's hearing me. Danko, do you hear me? All right. We got to say then goodbye. All right. Yeah. Give us your closing thoughts, 1 to 2 minutes, because we have to bring on Obrad Kesić then.
So what should I do then? Shall I wait, or I will
No, I just want you to speak 1 to 2 minutes on what you really want to say about Donald Trump, and then we have to say goodbye to you to bring on Obrad. Go for it.
Oh, okay. Yes, okay. When shall I begin?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, personally, I'm able to make difference. Honestly, Donald Trump, J. Trump, okay, he hurt Serbia and brought decisions that heavily wounded Serbia with Washington agreement, but much further, and I have much broader picture in my mind. What I'm saying is Trump is shield against those who wants to destroy United States of America, because America is on the edge to be what it has never been. This is completely something new. This is a new smell, new people, new things. Okay, I'm for everything new, but this is not good. So his idea to make America great again is the only right thing. This is a fight with no mercy. If Donald Trump loses, my feeling is that America is gone. America that we knew, that we loved, with the values we respected. This will be really historical direction of something completely new and with another story. That is what I'm saying.
Great, thank you, Danko.
Okay. I think
we've got to say goodbye to Danko now. Yes, thank you. We've got to say goodbye to Danko. If you can sign off now, and maybe we'll bring you in another night. Appreciate you muchly. We've got to make some room for Obrad Kesić. Thank you kindly. There he is. Welcome, Ambassador.
Good morning, or actually good evening to you.
Yes, indeed. I don't know if you were able to listen in a bit, but we would definitely love to get your take here, your analysis on the U.S. presidential election. Obrad Kesić is calling in from Brussels, so take it away, sir.
Well, it depends on where your conversation has gone, but let me just say that first and foremost, I don't really trust the polling that's showing this a very close race. Especially polling that's showing a close race in the swing states. I think based on everything I've been able to see, I was in the States a few days ago for a 10-day period, traveled from Washington, D.C. to Wisconsin. So drove through two swing states, had some time to talk to people, both in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin. I think that the polling is way off, to be honest with you. I think that the sentiment of the voters, the momentum that can be felt, and also internal polling. I did have a chance to talk to a few friends from the DNC. As you know, I was an active member of the Democratic Party until 2017. And the internal polling is not favorable for Kamala Harris. So everything lines up. If we listen to the pundits and some of the analysts, some are better than others, but let's say across the board, there is a consensus that right now at this particular point in time with the popular vote, Donald Trump is ahead. Which is remarkable given the entirely negative coverage that he's got from mainstream media, and not only over the course of this campaign, but for several years. There's been consistent negative coverage of Donald Trump. And if we look at the very favorable coverage that Kamala Harris has received, it's remarkable that he's polling ahead even by a couple of points at this time in the popular vote, so the nationwide vote. In terms of swing states polling, I think if we set aside some of the outlier polling that's very partisan, and I would argue that most of the polling that we hear and see in the U.S. are polls that are more political activist polling than accurate measurements of sentiment, because I think what you do is you put the thumb on the scale with polling too often in the United States, where you have pollsters skew the results depending on how many members of the Democratic Party and how many members of the Republican Party they poll. As opposed to how many independents. So if we look at the polling, I think there is also a consensus emerging that currently Donald Trump is narrowly ahead just about in every swing state. So if you ask me right now, if the election was held today, what would happen? More than likely, Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States.
What do you think, Obrad? Are we expecting problems like in 2020 after disputing election results in some states due to corruption, fraud? Any kind of prognosis there on what's going to transpire?
We already have seen a large number of legal suits, especially in swing states, but not only in swing states. If we go back only a few months at the beginning of the campaign, you had states that were trying to keep and prevent Donald Trump from being on the election list itself. So, in other words, ban him from running. That was, I would say, if we're looking just at the election, because of course lawfare has been a part of the Democratic strategy for many years now when it comes to former President Trump. But if we look at the election itself, lawfare started early. There were, like I said, a number of efforts from Colorado and other states to try to prevent him from being on the ballot. And now we see a continuation of that, where you have these continual fights. And what's very interesting to watch, especially from abroad, is you have three types of fights being fought. The first is over a list of voters. Now we know, and I was for 7 years involved with a organization that focused a little bit, American organization focused a little bit on elections overseas. And we know from the training from the 1990s that there are some warning indicators of possible irregularities when it comes to elections. Now, if we look at what's happening currently, especially with the voter lists in especially swing states, we see that there's an enormous problem. Where in many cases these lists have not been adjusted for a couple of decades. And what you see is a problem with people who have moved from addresses. So when you talk about Nevada and having some friends living in Las Vegas and film, you hear a typical story where they get multiple ballots for people who no longer live at their address, their children, and if they were renting to people like a young couple during the course of the last decade, they get their ballots as well. And given the lax voter ID laws in many of these states, it is not beyond the possibility or the realm of possibility that somebody could take it upon themselves to fill out multiple ballots. So you have the first challenge is over the voter list. We saw in Virginia where the Democratic Party sued the governor and the state of Virginia, had a judge reinstate the voter lists that were very problematic, and the people who had been purged from those lists, many who were deceased, many who no longer lived in the state, and many who were fraudulently entered into the voter list. The second challenges, legal battles that are being waged are over ID laws, and do they apply? How do you, especially when it comes to mail-in ballots, how do you verify identity? And it's, again, very interesting to watch, especially from abroad, to see the Democratic challenging ID laws and challenging the need to verify ID when it comes to mail-in ballots. Again, this is from the 1990s and the training that the U.S. government was offering foreign governments, and I believe they still do this throughout the world. This is a red light or a red flag that indicates the possibility of voting irregularities. if there aren't in place stringent laws that verify the eligibility of voters. And then the third set of challenges that we see are challenges that are very important in terms of polling stations and the kind of when does this election end. So we see a battle where the Democrats, the Democratic Party has been challenging the Republican Party over termination of voting and how you end the voting. So, for example, for mail-in ballots, we just saw a court in Georgia basically deny the request of the Republicans, petition of the Republic, that mail-in ballots received by mail are okay, but those hand-delivered should not be counted. Now, the judge ruled that you should, for the 2 days leading up into this is concerning early voting, that the 2 days now left leading up to the elections, that should remain open, and that you should be able to deliver hand ballots or hand deliver. So we see legal warfare being waged from the very beginning of this campaign. I think continue, unfortunately, well after the campaign, especially if some of the expectations hold, and that is that in the swing states and several swing states, it's going to be very close, or in some states that perhaps aren't being considered swing states like Virginia, New Mexico, that have been traditionally been more blue than red. If you see close results, there's a great possibility that this could drag out and we could have courts once again getting involved. Not to mention the prep that we see. We saw this also during 2020. Both parties, and that's a misconception, I think, that's out there, that it was only President Trump and the Republicans, or part of the Republican Party, that challenged the election results and election in dispute. But the Democrats, several months before in Philadelphia, had a wargaming undertaking in which they planned more or less to do the same thing that President Trump was initiating, and that is to challenge election results in several states that were close, and to basically try to use a mixture of pressure on the streets as well as legal challenges to some of the votes of electoral voters in order to change the outcome of the election. Once again, we see this happening. We see that the Democratic Party is preparing for the worst case scenario where their candidate loses, to try to launch an initiative that challenges the election result and try to prevent the swearing in of Donald Trump. This is not something out of the ordinary. It's something that's being discussed, and unfortunately it bodes ill for what happens following the elections. I think if they're close races, we're going to see not only the courts, but we're going to see further polarization and mobilization of voters, basically with the possibility of taking to the streets again.
Right. Two things I find highly concerning, and that is, one, the burning of ballot boxes that we've seen, and also with regards to the state of California, which is a huge percentage of the popular vote, that it's illegal for them to even ask to see your voter ID. What's being done about that? I haven't heard anything as of yet, legally.
Well, those are the ID issue. I've already pretty much addressed. It is an issue that's being waged in the courts. It's an issue that, unfortunately, we see again in some states being amended right before the elections to favor less strict control of identity and of voters who show up to vote. Now, given that this is an issue, and again, I return to the international context where the U.S. government has one very clear position, and that is that if you mess around with IDs and you amend voters lists, that is problematic. It's a red flag that something is going to happen that is not regular during the upcoming election. So abroad, it's very clear the U.S. government takes one position and basically says any type of lax voter ID laws, control of voter lists indicates the possibility of irregularities. But then when it comes to elections in the United States, you have one group, and in this case it's the ruling party, which says, look, we don't need the same approach when it comes to voting in the U.S. So that in itself, for me, is very problematic, because the lack of consistency and especially the lack of common sense and logic. You know, in the United States, as you know, you need an ID for just about everything. In fact, you can't even go to Congress and not have an ID to visit your representatives who you elect without an ID in many cases. So in order to elect somebody, you don't need an ID in some states. But when you go to visit them in Washington, D.C., you need to have an ID. And I imagine their local office, you also need to show an ID. You can't do any banking without an ID. You can't attend any from sporting events to concerts without showing some ID at some point, either you purchase tickets or when you actually show up at the venue, depending on what the event is. So having to show an ID is part of everyday life. So any argument that basically seems to say that this is something unusual to ask of voters during elections is very strange, to say the least. But it's also for, let's say, people who are abroad, it is problematic, because in just about every country here in the EU, you have to show an ID when you go to. Very few countries have the type of lax requirements that we see in some states in the United States. Now, on your second question, or your first part about the burning ballot boxes, I'm not sure this is really connected to the election itself. This seems to me to be more connected to what's happening in the Middle East and the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and Iran. It seems as if some protesters from the left have this as a way to further protest their dissatisfaction with U.S. policy. This is kind of the new manifestation of their unhappiness with U.S. policy. Wouldn't necessarily connect it in further evidence to what's happening with the elections and the campaign. One thing I would add that I think is also very important is we're seeing indications in some states, including in Wisconsin, of ballot harvesting. Now, in most states, ballot harvesting is illegal, and ballot harvesting basically means one individual that collects multiple ballots and then submits taxes that have been made readily available throughout, especially states where Democrats control kind of electoral policy, if not electoral law. So what we're seeing is indications that the laws are not being respected, and that individuals, in the case of Wisconsin, there has been at least photographic evidence of one individual that has had deposited several dozen, at the very least, several dozen ballots in a drop box outside of City Hall in Milwaukee. All of this is very problematic because people, as you know, are very sensitive to the perception that elections have not in the past been utterly free and fair. And if we go back to 2020, that is kind of a major campaign issue, even, where the Democratic Party insists that what we saw in terms of protesting following that presidential election was a revolt. And they insist that former President Trump should be held accountable for provoking the revolt against the government following those elections. And where many Republican, but also many independent voters are convinced that actually those elections were not free and fair, and that they were tampering with election results, especially in several swing states. So you have this very volatile situation where it's very important to establish the legitimacy of elections this time out, and to take every precaution so that people will feel comfortable when they vote, that their vote is being counted and that the election itself is free and fair. But yet we have these legal challenges that go in the opposite direction, that create suspicion and create doubt in the entire process. So I would say that I don't see this approach that the Democratic Party has taken with some of these issues as being responsible, given the context in which these elections are being held in the U.S.
Well, John, Zoran, you want to chime in? Phenomenal.
Well,
Analysis.
it's my privilege always to talk to. It's always talk to our best ambassador. I hope to be one day ambassador in the United States, which I was looking for much more than you being in Brussels, because diaspora really need people to worry about people as well in diaspora as much abroad. But me, you were not present before. Pretty much I'm type of independent person that like to talk about each individual issue separately, never really being a part neither left or right or any other party. Pretty much a regular citizen, that's concerned about certain issues. And of course, like everybody else is concerned about, where the world is going on, as we know, how divided we are, how healthcare gonna work, especially since I'm senior citizen. And on the other side, the most, what's going to happen with the United States, because we already see that we have blue and red America and that people are kind of moving into representative states. We have that confusion about immigration, and pretty much I'm the immigrant and I know how much I contribute to this country. And I know that, for example, in Iowa and Montana, which is completely red state, have the most illegal aliens who works in dairy or poultry factories. And we are getting into the situation in this polar world in which dollar is so devaluated, in which we have completely crashing, with the rest of the world and economies and wars and everything else. And we really do want to see America great again. But to me, it's very hard to define what does it mean being great. Great on whose expense? Of their own citizens or their own profit, on their own imperialism, that pretty much is happening around the world. So from that standpoint, I don't envy any of those candidates, because the task is unbelievably hard. We really live in totally new era of global crisis that we cannot really predict who is playing with who and how do we start or where do we end. So from that standpoint, I just want to ask you, because here it is right now, we have Serbs for Trump. I never saw pretty much Serbs for either Democratic Party, especially since bombardment of Yugoslavia, Serbia, etc., etc. We see pretty much a machine that is going on with proxy wars, with all that military. I don't see Trump being in positive situation that he can stop all that. The motion of the economy and the motion of all those conflicts as we see, and constant migration, it's so kind of complicated, that we believe that either party can make the solution. So that's what bothers me as a citizen of that political populism. So they tell us what we want to hear. They drive us into those directions, but I do not see responsibility and consequences of those prior parties. So we have right now pushing us, some Kamala that pretty much not really that anybody knows anything about it, unless it's very specific and special about, her history in that world, her nice smile, and we know that she's a product of something behind, that's already really nicely greased machine. And then we have Donald Trump, who wants to disturb, who wants to steer that water, and he wants to kind of initiate certain changes. But at what cost? And when you say, basically, hey, we're going to deport all those illegal aliens, there is cost to it. Those are billions, gazillions. There is so many of them. And we so much depend on that. Kamala Harris said, well, I'm going to cut, the cost in grocery store. You can't cut the grocery store, unless you have somebody who is willing to certain things, to work, that only poor people likes to do. So in that sense, I need to get feed from you in a certain hopeful balance that we make America great in the sense that they come back together and start having dialogue, start having basically understandings, that democracy should be honored for any, how should I say, elected people, because I see complete unrest on the street on Wednesday or Thursday. And when they were asking people, nobody trusts nobody. So no matter how close it's going to be, other opposing side, it's going to basically point the finger, and it's going to get in situation that we don't want to be where we're going to be. So if you can kind of just summarize, my thoughts and calm me down, as maybe politician can do, or just fellow Serb, that we really admire this country that gave us opportunity that we have, and that we kind of see what we can do in sense, how do we elect, select, and how do we behave? Because we want our voice to be heard. We want to be, in sense, recognized as a flower in this great country. But then again, we want some respectable party in sense that they will take care of Serbia as well, which really they didn't on either side. Thank you.
That there are so many questions that you've laid out.
I understand. Yeah.
So, and some of it is beyond competency, to be honest with you. If I had the answer to how to reunite the country, or how to, what's the approach to deal with the deep divisions within the country, then perhaps I would run for office. But I don't have those answers. What I do is analyze the situation, good or bad, have to see, and it's a little bit more difficult ambassador of a foreign country, because you can't really get involved in politics and endorse candidates in the United States, so in the third countries. But what I can say is that Zoran, the first part of or the first set of questions that you raised have more to do with the international order and what's happening with the international order. And for a long time, I was warning that the international order was going to change, and that the domination of the West was gone, or would be gone. Now, for the last year and a half, actually close to 2 years, I believe that the end has come, that it's the end of the Western dominance of the international order. And I believe that not only when it comes to economics and finance, but I believe that to be the case when it comes to geopolitics, diplomacy. I think that the West has accelerated something that was a normal process through some very poor decision making, from the use of sanctions on the part of the United States. We have now the greatest use of in the history of economic relations, where the United States government has put so many people and so many companies and so many foreign entities on sanctions lists, that it almost becomes, for many of these places, a badge of honor to be on the list, and a shame if you don't find yourself on the list, because most of the time the people who are there for political purposes, usually defending the interests of their own people, of their own state. So this very liberal use of sanctions that have yet to prove that they're efficient or effective as a instrument of diplomacy or of politics is very problematic. It helped accelerate something that was already happening in the world. And then we have what we see in Ukraine, the overwhelming support by the West through NATO, but also bilaterally of Ukraine in terms of material, in terms of resources. What we see is that this current war not a winnable war for NATO or for the West. And this is becoming much clearer over the last several months, but I think the West, especially Europe, is not prepared to deal with a war that will be lost. And I have tremendous issues within NATO, within the EU, once the realization sets in that war has been lost. So given those factors, and given the fact that the Western domination of the international order has come to an end, or in the view, let's say more view, it's coming to an end, that affects the United States greatly, because it's been the United States at the forefront of Western leadership. And in many ways, the Europeans agree with some politicians and the political elite in the United States that this is the indispensable nation. So when you have the U.S. so out front, leaning forward on so many issues across the globe, trying to impose its will across the globe, and you see that their ability to influence the makers is waning, then you see that there's a real crisis, a crisis of confidence. Now, that crisis of confidence not only pertains to international relations, but it also affects the situation at home. And so you mentioned immigration and migration. Those are big issues. What people are saying across the Western world, they're tired of open borders, that they no longer believe that open borders are an effective remedy for their economic problems, but also it creates so many social problems, and in many ways endanger existing minorities in these countries, because you have newcomers who don't share any cultural a connection or affinity or history with the countries where they're migrating to, and in most cases they're migrating illegally. So the first issue is not kind of this sentiment that there shouldn't be any immigrants. It's the sentiment that you cannot allow migration, you cannot allow illegal immigration, that there has to be a system of law. You know, here in Brussels, every day I hear the need for the rule of law. Well, the rule of law breaks down, enforce your own borders, and if you don't enforce your own laws, then you don't have the rule of law. You have a kind of arbitrarily political decision that affects the lives of every single citizen. So you have something that I think is a very crucial issue. Of course, the economy in the United States, I believe, is going to be the key issue for this election. But illegal immigration is probably the second most important issue in the minds of voters going to those ballot boxes. And what you see is that there's this fear that this isn't just happening because of incompetence or because of lack of attention or understanding of the dimension of this problem, but there's a fear where many people believe that this is a conscious policy, that one political party in the United States believes that their future and their ability to maintain their position of influence and control depends on migrants being able to cross illegally into the United States. Now, it's not that important what the reality is. It's that the fact that this perception is widespread and that so many people feel this way. So when you look, why are so many minorities now, despite the very brutal and harsh rhetoric concerning former President Trump, why are they expressing support for President Trump? Well, because there's a division even in communities, Hispanic communities, Latino communities, that basically say, look, we're not for illegal, for legal immigration. We don't want a country that allows so many millions of people to come in, because what does that do? It limits the resources that our community has access to. It takes away resources in our communities like schools and community centers, because when you get tens of thousands of migrants who show up and don't have housing, they have to be housed someplace.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you.
Yeah.
Your thought on that, because here's the situation. You know, we are not replacing 400 illegal nannies with 400 legal nannies. We are talking about who's gonna mow the grass, who's gonna pick up the strawberries. We are talking about how it's gonna affect us on the other side. But the reason why I'm asking you that is pretty much, how do you see it? Why? Why did it allow that flow of people coming into United States in the last, whatever, 5, 6, 7 years? That's unprecedented. Is that because there is too much people on the planet, not enough to sustain Social Security and pension funds? Or we need military, to kind of prepare ourselves for something because they're offering U.S. citizenship and everything else? Or they need those illegal voters, whatever it is? Because I don't think so. It's just for voting, because if they know what they're doing, if they know what they're offering, they should be win in landslide. And if it's so tight, then it's amazing, how we divided this country, that we are failing on all issues all abroad. It's just bad life in the United States.
Well, Zoran, first,
I just
let
wanted
me
to
say
say something, if I could, Obrad, because I want Obrad then to respond to everything, and I want John to say a couple of words as well, and then Obrad to address all of our issues. I just wanted to say this, if I may. Sorry to interrupt. So basically, America was known as the global policeman for democracy, and now I just basically see anarchy coming. I wanted you to address that with regards to those illegal immigrants. And maybe, John, you have a couple of words to say that you want Obrad to address, and then we'll let Obrad go into a long spiel on all of that to address all the issues. Go ahead, John.
As I've said earlier, I'm openly a partisan on the side of Trump. I supported Trump publicly when he ran in 2016, when he ran again in 2020. I think that Trump is a reflection of the focus on business and on finance that is a characteristic of the American system. Many, many people go to America because of the material life that they want to achieve. Trump reflects that. Trump has been, I know there are those who are his detractors, but I believe that Trump has fought a Herculean style battle as a one-man army that fought his way up an incredible slope alone against his own party. He had to wipe out the rhinos, the Republicans in name only. He had to overcome that lobby, which was a part of a double-headed dragon called the military-industrial complex, which until Trump arrived controlled both parties. So it didn't really matter to the American military-industrial, and I call it the military-industrial media complex, not just the military-industrial complex. We've hit the information age. This is the age of Aquarius. Communications are critical. Most of the decisions in America are made by a communication flood that so overwhelms the opposition that they give up. And this kind of demonization and PR and propaganda is flaunted best by the most powerful and most deadly weapon in the American arsenal, and we all know what that weapon is. It starts with H, and I'm not talking about the hydrogen bomb. I'm talking about Hollywood. Hollywood, the lying mainstream media, the film industry, the TV monopolies, their licensed affiliates inside Serbia, even if we can even consider this, that America's media lie machine comes into the living room of the Serbian citizen in Kragujevac, and he can't or she can't get away from it. And think of what it's like to be caught in the center of that lie machine and to be Donald J. Trump saying, we're going to have to make our money by work, by trade, by profiting from our ideas, and not by being the killing machine of this planet.
Great. Thank you, John. And so I would love to pass the ball back to Obrad to wrap it all up and to discuss all of these other issues, and then we'll close out. Obrad, back to you.
Well, there's so many issues, but going back to what Zoran just raised, these issues of the need for laborers, the fact that they're in the forming of the question, but that's not just Zoran's question. That's kind of the major argument for why you have this lax approach to immigration. There's at the heart of it this idea that somehow there's not enough workers already in the United States. And when Zoran, when you say maybe it's and then you list all of these potential reasons why we're seeing this type of migration into the United States, you're right. There's not just one reason behind it, factors that play in, but part of it is ideology. Now, we can't separate what happened in terms of this idea that the end of history had occurred, all of the Berlin Wall and kind of the implosion of communism in Europe and in the Soviet Union. That's very important because Western elites in particular, they believe that the only form of that's worth having is liberal democracy, and liberalism has transformed itself into something else called globalism, and the essential notion has been built, or the ideological framework has been built on things that have been in place for a generation or several generations, and that is this idea of free trade, unrestricted trade, the idea that borders should be open, freedom of movement, and it should be complete freedom of movement, unrestricted. And then you have a third component, which is once you start taking active moves to bring this to fruition and to life, like the United States did under Clinton with the signing of NAFTA, which I personally believe, as someone who grew up in an area outside of Chicago where there weren't any Republicans, that at that point, that was the beginning of the betrayal of the Democratic Party of labor, was the signing of NAFTA. Because what that did, what that allowed was large corporations, especially in the auto industry, to shift production. So they weren't paying at that time an average of $17, $19 an hour to American workers. They began to pay $1.75 to Mexican workers. And this was fueled in principle by two very strong influences. The first is greed. Because the bottom line is profit, and the bigger, the lower the cost, the bigger your profit. Overnight, you transform your books into your profit, and that means greater success on Wall Street and with your stocks, and that means greater bonuses for all of the top managers. And that in the end, and this is the second belief that fueled it, was that U.S. consumers would get cheap products, much cheaper, and that would fuel the economy in the United States. Now, I would argue that that is partially true. But the other part of it is you can't buy even cheaper products if you don't have a job. And if you look at not only academics into what happened in the Rust, what happened to my hometown of East Chicago, which was at one point one of the major producers of steel in the United States, but in the world. And then you see what happens from in the 90s. You see this of jobs, the leaving of American workers kind of tricked and exploited, and then at a very crucial point where economic development, given all of the factors after the Cold War, the U.S. should have been in a major position of expanding its economy and helping labor in the United States, but that didn't happen. The middle class labor suffered tremendously from the 1990s to today. And the biggest reason for that is this ideological embrace of this idea of borders and freedom of movement and cheap labor. So, okay, you think, okay, we're exploiting these jobs to Mexico, but what happens if we bring cheap labor to the United States? Well, one of the things that happens is lower wages for the people with low incomes in the United States, for the most vulnerable parts of American society in urban areas, big cities. What you see is basically a displacement that occurs at the expense of somebody. So when you have, and it's the law of physics, when you have a force coming in, there has to be a force that gives in order to make room for that in force. And in this case, what gives, for the most part, are people who are minorities and low-income families and who are the most vulnerable society. So I don't think it's a clear-cut argument. In fact, in graduate school, my mentor happened to be a feminist and someone who focused on women's issues. And I'd like to relate this now to the cultural wars, because I believe the cultural wars in the United States contribute to what we're seeing with these populist movements, not only MAGA, but even on the left, there are populist movements are emerging. And we're seeing this across the West. In Europe, we're seeing this. If we looked at the last elections in France, you had the populist left and the populist right that really proved to be very successful in the elections. And so why is this happening? But it's partly is the cultural war. So when my mentor, who was the chair of my thesis, when she was studying and focusing and working for women's rights, focused on the very limited opportunities. So you have a pie that only has so many slices, but in the perception of feminists, most of those slices are going to men. So their battle was to get an equal amount of that pie and to have the equal size. So when you're giving the pie out, everybody has the ability to have the same size piece of pie. Now what's happened is that the cultural wars is that it's the same pie, but then women are being told, listen, yeah, that's fine. You guys succeeded. Congratulations, you're equal, or you're close to equal. But now we're going to take a piece of that pie and we're going to give it to men who identify as women. For most feminists, it doesn't matter that these men identify as women. They still see them as men. And that's why you see this fight and this conflict in Western societies between traditional feminists and people who believe that transgender individuals have to have the same opportunities, and that this battle is the same type of battle as for the right of women. It's very ironic because in the end, it takes away from women. It takes opportunity away, it takes resources away, and it also takes honors away. So you have this celebration in the United States that President Biden was the first president to appoint a woman admiral. But then you look closer and you see that the woman admiral is actually a man who identifies as a woman and now sees himself as a woman. So if you're a woman in the United States, you look and you say, hold on a second, couldn't find a woman to nominate and to appoint in this position to make history. You had to go and find a man and then appoint that person to be the first admiral in the history of the United States, female admiral. very problematic, and it's not simple because you're dealing with core issues of beliefs, but you're dealing with core issues of identity. And that has a great impact in how people are fearful at this particular point in Western societies. And you were
Obrad, this is one of the great things about Donald J. Trump, and that is that he confronts these issues just straight in the face. He doesn't beat around the bush. And although that's not the method that the mainstream lying media uses, they try to lie their way into your mind. Donald Trump just says, this is crazy, and I'm not standing for it. And if I'm president, this is not going to happen, period. And I think the economic downturn in the United States, which is compounded by the massive outflow of hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons, first to Ukraine and now to Israel, is creating a crisis of the American economy that the American economy doesn't know how to respond to. And the reason why it doesn't know how to respond to it is it doesn't have a brain, because the American economy is run by private profiteers who think profit first, nation second. And Donald Trump is saying, you can make a profit, but you're going to have to do it within the interests of the nation. And that's how he repatriated production to the United States. And that's how he created an upswing of patriotism and make America great again-ism that is going to sweep him into power. And I agree with Obrad on this one, that he's absolutely right. I think the polls are misleading. I think the polls have been purposely tweaked, purposely organized to downplay the support for Donald J. Trump. And I was having a discussion earlier this evening here in Canada in which I also agree that for the first time in basically a generation, there's a very good possibility of seeing the Republican candidate, not the rhino candidate, not the Republican in name only candidate like Bush dynasty and before, but the real Republican, the anti-imperial American, the man who and the woman who wants a republic, not a world empire, but a republic. I think they're on the way back, and I think there is a real chance that they're going to win a majority of the vote, which hasn't happened in ages. So if that happens, not only will Donald Trump come back into power, he'll come back into power with a mandate, and not a mandate for retribution, which is the crazy propaganda that we're hearing from the Democratic Party. He will have a mandate to affect the Republican program, which he's been fighting for now 3 elections. This is election number 3, and he intends to implement it because he is going to get a mandate. And the Democrats and the leftists and the BLM and the anti-Americans in America are going to lose this election. And that's the way it's going.
Yeah, I think so too, that Trump is super strong on the economy and anti-war, and absolutely way too many billions have gone to Israel for the war, to the Ukraine, etc. And look at the poor people in North Carolina suffering from Hurricane Helene, and there's no resources for them from FEMA, and in Florida, it's absolutely a travesty. So I think Donald Trump's definitely got it there, because Americans are suffering way too much.
Let me say one more thing. No matter how evident it appears that he is going to come into a major victory here, that should not cause any Serbian American voter or any other voter in America who supports Donald Trump to ease off. Do not ease off. Do the opposite. When a snowball is rolling down the hill, roll it harder and roll it faster so it gets bigger, and so that the decision is so decisive that Donald Trump will sweep into power, bring Republicans into power in Congress, and achieve the entire agenda for which people have been voting for him 3 elections in a row. And in this election, we're going to get the result. That's the way it has to be done. And there are people like me who are not even American citizens who depend on peace in our lives outside of America, in Serbia, in Canada, in Russia, wherever people live. It all depends on Donald Trump getting elected as the anti-war candidate. He's not some long-haired hippie. He's the anti-war candidate, and the anti-war candidate is the American businessman and the American believer in democracy and free speech. That's the anti-war candidate. That's Donald Trump.
Thank you, John. I think Zoran wanted to say something, and then we'll let Obrad wrap
well,
up.
Well, Obrad, you said before, that you had some kind of information about, and the feel, what's going on. I'm in California. I see a lot of, pickup trucks on the 405 freeway with the Trump's flag. I do see, action, reaction, and everything else. But the last win on election was with landslide, when it was Obama. And then we start having, that very tight, basically situations, marginal, and we really can look into that. My hope is, to be honest with you, is really that this election happened with landslide either way, because I cannot predict. I cannot see, who is doing what, who is manipulating, stealing, whatever it is doing, because if it's tight, that's where my worry is, because nothing will be done. It will be very destructive. It will be very chaotic. And looking into the situation is, we have to give somebody to take care of this country, and we see that they are also one additional question for you is, your sense, are they going to continue printing money, or they're going to make some radical changes? Because that's very, very important issue to my well-being, my mortgage, my inflation situation and everything else, as well the whole world in sense, because we have $100. I went to the grocery and they said, do you have some smaller? I said, $100 is the smallest bill today. Well, I was thinking about 20s, so I can return. So we're getting in this situation that we completely devaluate, and if we go, in order for sake of, call it new world leader, to sustain his power, he's going to continue printing the money. How do you see those two things?
Well, first, let me, because I wanted to come to it even before your question, is the only way to avoid major unrest and kind of instability within the U.S. following the election is a clear victory by one of the candidates. And so I agree with John, with you in your comments and your analysis. Basically, if you have a clear winner, a victory that's undisputable, and you have a winner in the case of, because we're focusing on Donald Trump, if you have a victory where Trump for the first time wins a majority of the vote, so the majority of all of the people vote in the United States elect him, then it makes it very difficult to maintain the polarization, because that becomes a factor for stability, because it's hard to that the election was stolen if the victory is so overwhelming. But I agree with Zoran. I think that the chances of that are very slim, not because of the polling, but more importantly, the way the system functions. Basically, modern elections in the Western world, and I would include even the Western Balkans as part of that model, societies are very divided. And you have the division of societies, and I think partly it's intentional to keep people divided, keep them in fear, keep them hating each other, because to control them, basically. So you figure out a mathematical formula to get 50 plus 1, and then you focus only on are going to vote for your party, your political option, and you don't need to exert resources or effort, because you have a formula that allows you to calculate with precision who are the voter groups that give your political party, your political platform the enough votes to win. And that's what we saw. I was involved in party politics, and I can tell you in the day, over 2 decades, it became a mathematical formula. It was like scientific. You knew how to put the math together, especially in swing states. So really, when we're talking about the presidential elections, it comes down to 7 to 9 states that decide the outcome of the election, because other states, all the other states, they're already well in advance known how they tend to vote. Now, Donald Trump may change that, because we're seeing some very unusual, even public polling results in New Mexico, in New Hampshire, even now as we speak.
New York,
Things
Virginia.
seem to be, yeah. And I'm also, because I'm very focused on especially minority voters. I think this is a key issue for the United States, is what's happening now with kind of the breakup of this grassroots group that the Democrats took for granted. For the longest time, Democrats put very little effort in winning, especially black vote in the United States, because they said, if they don't vote for us. And plus, Democrats have been in power in these big cities for, in many cases, for 40 plus years. So basically, these voters began to be taken for granted. They didn't invest heavily in trying to win them over through arguments or through persuasion. What they did is they played on their fears. So basically, the argument was, if these guys come to power, they're going to deprive you of your rights. They're going to send things back 100 years, and maybe even slavery comes back. Don't forget those infamous words from previous campaigns. They're going to put you all in chains, that President Biden said. Well, that has been the approach, unfortunately. And what it has done is so deeply divided society that we're now discussing, is it possible at all to even after the elections bring America together again? And this is a serious question.
Yeah.
But I mean, because on the other side, I look and I see what's happening. When we talk about the Republican Party that John was talking about, this is not the same Republican Party that was in place prior to President Trump. This is a new Republican Party. My friends who were Republicans 20 years ago would not recognize this party. In fact, they would think that somehow the Democrats taken the party over, because what has the Republican Party become? It's become the party of the middle class, of workers in the United States. You see this disconnect between the leadership of and their membership, which is overwhelmingly for President Trump. And then you see the tech sector, all shifting to the Democrats. That was the situation 20 years ago with the Republican Party. Big capital supported Wall Street, supported Republican candidates, most part, and then hedged their bets by giving money to the Democrats. Well, that changed beginning in the 1990s. And what we see now is a transformation. Parties have almost changed roles and changed the structure of their membership.
Shifting to each other. We see Democrats going to Republicans, Republicans going to Democrats. Amazing.
Well said. Yes, Republican Party is. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say what you see when that is, you're seeing neocons, which have been at the heart of what John was talking about, kind of the broad support for any war, any time, any place. They're shifting. They're going back and because originally they started off in the Democratic Party, now they're going back to the Democratic Party and the anti-Trumpers. You have different profiles, but basically they come into two groups: the neocons, who have over several decades become Republicans, voted Republican, who are transferring themselves back, like Liz Cheney and her father, who are going back to kind of the roots of that philosophy, that approach to life. They're going back to the Democratic Party. And then you have Republicans who are traditional Republicans who aren't comfortable with the transformation of being within their own party, because they don't want that transformation. They don't want the Republican Party to become the party of labor, because in their minds they're very rigid. They think labor means socialism, and because of that they say, hold on a second, we can't allow our party to be taken over by these socialists, which is very strange, it sounds, when you say it. But when you see the type of people who are migrating from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, and then you see who's coming to the Republican Party, which are in large numbers minorities, middle class people, workers, then you see, and I have to, from my distance, I look and I think, honest with you, that the Republican Party is better off without these people who are deserting it, and are becoming a better, more inclusive and broader party because of the people who they're accepting and who are becoming.
I was just going to say. Sorry, Obrad. I was just going to say the same thing. Yes, the Republican Party has become more inclusive because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the local candidate we've ever seen in America that is so interactive, that engages the audience, that speaks directly to them, not at them like the others. And so for that reason, also another minority group, the black males, really have woken up and realized that the Democratic Party has just taken advantage of them, asked them for the vote, but really never given back. They are really moving over to Donald Trump. And it's beautiful to see, again, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, who have left the Democratic Party and moved over to Republicans. So, yeah, we're seeing a major shift and even, switching up. Absolutely. It's incredible what's happening. These dynamic phenomenon, for sure, in American politics.
Yeah. A few years ago, I had the opportunity, because of a good friend who's heading the organization, the Council for National Policy, which is a very conservative organization originally created to counter the Council on Foreign Relations by the senior President Bush. I attended one of their annual meetings in Naples, Florida, and the thing that struck me at that time was the large presence of blacks and of Hispanics that were at the conference, and most of them had been Democrats. 3-4 years ago, it was actually right before the Virginia elections, because one of the main speakers was the current Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, and she was fantastic. And when I saw this, it kind of further persuaded that the Democrats were totally mistaken in their strategy, that in their belief that they could take minorities for granted, that the minority communities would continue to vote automatically without a lot of invested effort in these communities. And so, seeing young candidates at this convention, at this meeting in Naples, really made me realize that this was an unstoppable transition that was happening not only with the Republican Party, but also with the Democratic Party. So going back to your question, Zoran, is there a chance, a hope, following the election? Is because of this shift and what's happening, but I don't think it's going to play out immediately after the election. I think it's going to take a couple more election cycles to play out, but it also depends on a number of factors, and one of them you raised, and I didn't get a chance to really address it, was, are they going to print money? Yes, they're going to print money, because that's the established policy. Even Donald Trump printed money. In his first mandate. A lot of money. Yeah, and the U.S. unfortunately has put itself in a position where to tighten the belt and to stop printing money means really taking enormous risk going forward. It means further to instability. They're adding to political within the country, because once you take these measures, they become polarizing, and people have to adjust how they live. Then it starts, and the opposition always uses these issues. It's not like they see the good and say, this tightening of the belt and stopping the free printing of money is good across the board. No, it's just the opposite. Opportunity for us to take advantage of the situation. And the use of sanctions, the use of internet, of dominated financial institutions, banks, to pressure small countries and large countries. What that does is that fuels this desire for an alternative. So you see, if let's say this BRICS ever comes to fruition, and you see kind of the BRICS bill that's circulation, what you'll see, and you see a system that they're trying to build for international financial transactions and banking. If that really begin to function, most countries in the world move to their system. Why? Because the Western system comes with political pressure. It comes with political conditionality, whereas the alternative does not have the political. Now, we can argue the good and bad. What's authoritarian governments as a democratic government, but that's irrelevant when it comes to the economic, to decision to make the best choices for their own people and their own countries. They want to be able to do that without having unfair pressure applied to their decision making from the outside. And so in this case, I think what's happening is a natural process where people are within their DNA programmed to seek freedom. Now, whether that's freedom means physical freedom or economic freedom or intellectual freedom, we all have the same need for freedom. Well, it's the same for countries. Countries and nations, they want freedom. And so when it comes to business, when it comes to banking, when it comes to sending money, like the current SWIFT system, all of that are restrictive systems. They're controlled systems. And the biggest problem with it is its political conditionality for most countries in the world that are unacceptable. And you see now this so-called sovereignist movement across the board in Europe and States, because that's what MAGA is when it all is said and done. It's a sovereignist movement. It's a movement to restore sovereignty.
Let's stay a little bit on money, please, because, to me, we made a history pretty much, Kamala raised $1 billion for campaign. Like today, like right now, I'm getting, basically on Facebook asking me, Joe Biden asking me for $5 to donate, in order to battle. So what I'm looking into it, well, now on the other side, you have Elon Musk saying, hey, I'll give you $1 million, whoever. I mean, talking about money in politics, talking about necessity for lobbying. I mean, you are part of that society and you see that around. And the question is, is any way, that really democracy can work without that corporative initiative? And we know that artificial intelligence, it's basically government and corporation. They just take care of the power, they take care of the profit, of the numbers and everything. We just kind of end up being numbers. And in that sense, is that gonna, and as you said, about BRICS, I don't think so America gonna allow BRICS, to thrive. I don't know how and why, but that is the end of the America. So to me, how do I want to end up in nuclear war, with Russia, or deal with the Muslim nation, and send my kid, to war? I mean, to me, it's amazing, how that stupidity brought us, to this brink of the existence. So that's what I'm kind of trying to see. Is it just the money? We are humans. We can engineer something.
Before we go to Obrad, I'd just like to say something with regards to that. We really are moving into a multipolar world for sure. BRICS is decentralized, right? And that has to do with sovereign nations and their freedom, as Obrad mentioned. So that's definitely taking off, and they do have an alternative to the SWIFT system that is launching. And it's really going to be powerful because it is backed by gold and is not fiat currency as the US dollar is, which just keeps losing power parity as time goes, printing up more and more. So, and I did want to say that Biden is copying off of Trump's there of asking for $5, $10, small donations. And look where he has come to really gain such a huge popular vote. Whereas Kamala is now receiving huge corporate funding and getting all of these celebrity endorsements. But all of that is actually backfiring on her with huge backlashes, like the Taylor Swift thing, all of this, Julia Roberts, Megan Thee Stallion, shaking her booty for endorsements for Kamala Trump. They're desperate, even though they have huge corporate funding. And Trump was going after the little monies bit by bit, asking for it more and more, and look, gaining more and more the popular vote. That's my 2 cents. Back to you, gentlemen.
Well, I think there are a number of it's hard to address everything, but let's go back to the economic side of things. Already we have the de-dollarization occurring in. So you have Saudi Arabia that has agreed with the Chinese to use Chinese currency in their transactions for oil. So the era of the petrodollar is over. The fact that now you have more and more countries that are agreeing bilaterally in their trade relations to use alternative currencies means that right now it's not a significant threat to the U.S. dollar, but over time, it becomes kind of the mainstream approach to trade. That becomes a serious threat to the U.S. dollar. And if it becomes a serious threat to the U.S. dollar, it becomes a serious threat to the U.S. Economy and to stability within the United States. At the same time, where, as Zoran has pointed out, you're printing dollars freely, and so your dollars that you have in your pocket really don't represent the real value or their real potential value, I should say. So you have these combinations which are sounding very loud warning bells, but unfortunately I would argue that the Western political elites are ignoring the warning bells, that they're basically trying to preserve the previous system, denying that the multipolar system is posing a major threat, at least to the prevailing ideology of liberalism. And I think that this is a tremendous mistake, as opposed to really trying to reevaluate and reposition themselves. The Western countries are kind of doubling down on a losing bet. And unless there's a correction, we're going to see serious economic instability. Now, having said that, I think it's also important to recognize that this is parallel to what we're seeing happening when it comes to political influence. You had a situation where a number of world leaders, including the president of Mexico, for an extended period of time would not take the call of President Biden. You had the most powerful ruler in Saudi Arabia, the crown prince, refusing to communicate with the president of the United States for an extended period of time. This could not have happened in the past. The U.S. power and U.S. hegemony were unchallenged from the 1990s, but even earlier. We could talk about the unipolar moment where the U.S. became this power capable of projecting power globally. And what happened? What happened was a total misreading of what Fukuyama said was the end of history, and that the authoritarian, autocratic ideologies had been defeated, and that now we can all see kumbaya and hold hands and move forward without any serious challenges to Western dominance. Well, that's done. That was not true, and it is now proving this belief that had, especially political elites in the West and in the United States in particular, that proved to be self-destructive. Because that gave this overfilling of confidence. The overfilling has led to unilateral use of force without consideration for international law. So it undermined international law, something that Western nations, even the EU here where I am, they claim that that's the most important thing keeping the international order together, is the respect for international law. And if you look at the condemnation of Russia, it all comes from the argument that ignored international law. But of course, Western countries fail to mention that international law itself has been directly undermined, like the United Nations, through unilateral act, in particular the United States, but also by Europe. So if you don't respect law, and you do whatever you want because you feel this, you have the strength to do that, you have the ability to project power, regard for law, then you can't expect at some point when you weaken that other countries won't, other big powers won't begin to behave like you've behaved. And then you can't restore the law that you violated by arguing, oh, hold on a second, you clearly are elite, you're acting criminally, but when we did the similar or the same thing in some instances, we did it for better reasons, and because of that, it's allowable that we violate international law. That's just it. It doesn't work.
Excellent points. Yeah, excellent points, Obrad. Breaching international law by the West really is having their economies tank. I see it, everything ricocheting back on them. Those sanctions on Russia, and I don't see Russia as the aggressor and as violating international law at all. I see, really, I have to say, President Putin, a very righteous leader that is adamant about doing things according to international law and not breaching that whatsoever. And that is why he is rising. Russia, Holy Mother Russia, as we say, is rising. The BRICS countries are rising economically, politically, in every which way. And the West is definitely falling. So the new president will definitely have to deal with that, because that economic system is coming crashing down with the printing of that money and just the losing of the purchasing power parity extremely. This is why Americans are really struggling with inflation and have to choose between medicine, between groceries, etc. It's really a mess, the economy. So it's a serious issue to deal with. Absolutely.
Angelina, if I could, I'd like to make add a few points to the list here of what I think is going on. After the Civil War, the United States changed course. Before the Civil War, the United States had been a primarily agrarian-led country. Farmers in the South had dominated the country, and they had the control of the labor force through slavery. Most Americans, if you ask them on the street, which was the party of slavery, until recently, they would have told you that the party of slavery was the Republican Party, because they forgot, after the Republican Party became an imperialist party, they forgot that the Republican Party was Abraham Lincoln's party, and that the Republican Party was the anti-slavery party, that the Republican Party was running the secret railway to save the black slaves from the southern states. It was the Democratic Party that was officially the party of slavery, that voted for the Civil War and not to allow the slaves to go free. So that was the identity in 1865. The Republican Party and then the Democratic Party, through very, very professionally done sleight of hand on the part of the Democratic Party, managed to convince many people in America that the Democrats were the more progressive, more liberal, more socially correct, proper party. They went through a transformation inside their own party. They took control of the black voters, who had been 100% pro-Republican voters in the first election after 1865. Think about that. 100% of the blacks of America, when they were given the vote, voted for the party of Abraham Lincoln. They voted Republican. And here we have a man who single-handedly has converted the entire political prism in America, and that man is Donald Trump. You may not like him personally. You may not like his physique. You may not like his hair. You may not like all of this about grabbing women by the pussy and whatever else stupidly he might have said or done during this campaign. But he is not the candidate for perpetual war. He is not the candidate for profit by blood. He is not that candidate. He is the candidate that is making America be a nation of productivity, not a nation based on financial manipulation and endless printing of worthless toilet paper. That is the difference between the two parties. Donald Trump has offered the American citizens freedom from the military-industrial media complex and what it's been running for the past more than 50 years. It's been running a protection racket. What is a protection racket? A protection racket is when a gang of criminals comes to your restaurant and says, "That's a nice big front window you've got there. I think you probably want to buy some insurance, or that front window might get broken." So the United States became the richest country in the world by forcing countries around the world to buy its overpriced military weapons in order to be safe and to be free. They made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars doing that to other countries. Then they got the US taxpayer to pay that. And so they bankrupted the US taxpayer by raising their taxes and raising the costs of living in America to pay for the military empire, which has bankrupted America. America then bankrupted itself to China, and China just kept on doing productivity. And it was productivity versus the protection racket. And the inevitable result was that productivity would win because China was doing better what America used to do than America was doing it. And so the collapse of the empire came that way. And then everything else flows from that. Donald Trump is flipping the entire thing on its head. He has picked partners like Elon Musk, who 20 years ago, everybody would have expected Elon Musk to be a Democrat. Silicon Valley, he's a little bit of a social liberal. He's going to vote Democrat. Elon Musk has put his entire life behind the Republican Party campaign, plus at least $70 million in his latest tranche of personal support. And at the same time, going for productivity and for innovation and space travel is bringing back the American dream. That used to belong to the Democrats. When John F. Kennedy talked about the dream of putting a man on the moon, that dream now belongs to the Republicans and to Elon Musk and to Donald Trump, who are planning to put man on Mars. There is the initiative in the American machinery has transferred to the Republican Party because the Republican Party has a dream and they're trying to make that dream come true. A high standard of living without doing it by selling weapons. And Donald Trump represents that. And on the other side, I think the issue that we can, if you wanted to hear about criticism of Kamala, I don't care that much about how many people she put in jail for marijuana possession. It's not the key issue in America. She did more against blacks in California than any white prosecutor did. So all of this is stuff about her being a black Indian woman, candidate of color, identity candidate, just scratch the surface and she's none of the above. But what is important is to remember we know about Watergate, and now we should be talking about Senile Gate. What is Senile Gate? Senile Gate is what did Kamala know and when did she know it? When did Kamala know that Joseph Biden was senile? She had to know first. She's the vice president. She meets with him every single day, at least twice a day. Kamala knew that Joseph Biden was senile. Did Kamala fulfill her constitutional duty to report that fact and to remove the president and to have the Congress weigh in on whether the president was mentally competent to do his job? No, she didn't. Kamala Harris violated the U.S. Constitution and was in dereliction of her duty as Vice President of the United States. And people will say, well, it was an emotional time for her and she didn't want to turn her back on the man who made her vice. No, wrong. Think deeper. Use your minds, the minds that God gave us. Why did Kamala Harris delay in identifying that Joseph Biden was senile? Because Kamala Harris became the acting president behind the scenes illegally. Point one. Point two, because when the primaries started for the selection of the presidential candidate of the United States, Kamala Harris got zero support. And she knew that if she identified Biden as being senile, it would go through a primary process which she could never, ever win, and could therefore not be the black Indian female candidate of the Democratic Party. And so she delayed identifying the fact that Joseph Biden was senile. until it was too late to have a primary process. She kidnapped the Democratic nomination from her own party. She stole the nomination by covering up the senility of the president, violating the Constitution, violating her job description, and stealing the nomination from her party on the advice of the backroom boys who work for the banksters and the military-industrial complex. That's how Kamala Harris became the candidate. That if more Americans thought about how their system works and how she became the candidate, they would all be asking, what did she know and when did she know it? And why did she not reveal it? And when you ask why, which is always the most important question as a journalist, who, what, when, where, how, and why? Why Kamala Harris is the candidate is because Kamala Harris chose to use the U.S. system against the U.S. people to take the nomination of President of the United States without any democratic process, which makes her, by definition, a fascist.
Yeah, and it wasn't just her alone.
This
it
is
was the Obamas
definition
behind
of
her and the deep
fascism,
state.
what
Yeah,
Kamala did to the Democratic Party and the American people. That's fascism. Trump, on the other hand, fought tooth and nail from when he first came and said, I make nice ties and I have excellent steaks. These are the best steaks in the world. And he fought his way up over what is now 3 election campaigns, tooth and nail, against his own corrupt party establishment, against the lying mainstream media, which is majority owned by the arms manufacturers who tell the media to destroy any candidate who wants to end the blood for money business. This is the biggest conspiracy in the political history of America, and the main conspirator.
great.
The main conspirator.
Thank you.
Is
Thank you, John.
Kamala Harris, but the main person behind her is Barack Obama and his speechwriter,
you nailed
David
it, buddy.
Axelrod. Barack Obama planned this. Barack Obama is remote controlling this, and his speechwriter, who controls Barack Obama and who ran him through a teleprompter for his 8 years of presidency, David Axelrod, ran this whole scam. And that's what's happening here. You have got your picture. This is America. There is no democracy in America. It's all a sham. It's not a two-party system. It's not even just a duopoly. It's a monopoly with two fake puppet heads. That's what they did. And who broke this?
You nailed it, John.
An orange-haired property developer who came from outer space, landed like the little prince on some planet, and said, this is not going to happen. I'm a Republican. I want to do business. I don't want to make murder the business of America. That's the most important thing about Donald Trump.
Thank you, John.
All of the
all
of the rest is icing on the cake. You don't have to like the man. It's not a Mr. or Miss Congeniality contest. Please grow up. You can hate the man, but still admit that he's a better president than she is, even if you love her.
Yeah, great, John. I totally maintain the same thing. It's the Obamas and the deep state behind Kamala Harris. She's an empty vessel, as we said, an empty suit. She doesn't represent anything. That's why she has no policies whatsoever. That's why she just laughs her time away and philosophizes. She just speaks sweet nothings. It's absolutely ridiculous listening to her. So, yeah, I totally agree with you there. We'll let Obrad maybe wrap it up. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say once again,
I've got
the most important to make.
Yeah, Obrad's got the bishop in from Paris. He's got to get himself to church and greet him. So let's give the word to Obrad, and then he's gonna have to bow out. Sorry about that, John. Take it away.
Well, I pointed the finger where I think it needed to be pointed.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot that we said in this 1.5. I want to just close by saying that regardless of what happens with this election, this is going to be the most unique election in the history of the United States. And there have been many unique elections because you have to understand that having one candidate, one party replace its main candidate more than halfway through the election campaign with another candidate after primary voters had already voted and cast their votes is without precedent. Having another candidate twice escape assassination is without precedent in U.S. politics. Having the type of campaign we've seen with not only prominent Hollywood stars and musicians and actors and actresses and comedians all playing such a big role in campaigning is although we've had it in the past, but we've never seen anything like of participation by Hollywood, and we can argue also by the IT sector, especially adding the role of Elon Musk in the mix. And then another thing that's very unique, I think, in this election is the emphasis on social media. We saw it in particular from former President Trump, going to the bloggers, going to people like Joe Rogan, and basically saying, you know what, the era of mainstream media and traditional media is over. Now we have the ability to influence voters in a totally different, new way that offers more exposure with less commercial breaks, if you will. So a lot of things have happened, transference from one party to the other, the support from one party for the other party's candidate. A lot of things are happening that makes a very unique election, but more importantly, a very unique moment in history. And I would argue, given that I'm speaking to you from Brussels, this is not only a very important moment for U.S. history, it's a very important moment for the world and for the history of the world. And it ties to all of these factors we've discussed, especially the transformation of the international order, and also what's happening in the Western world and kind of this lack of confidence in our own political systems, of our own economic systems, and the fear and insecurity that comes with. So I hope and pray that along with Zoran, in terms of what he said, that following the elections in the United States, we'll have another unique moment where the nation comes together and where whoever wins, and even though right now it looks like that victor will be Donald Trump, but no matter who wins, has the ability to reach out, to drop this divisive rhetoric, especially coming from the Democratic side, and to focus on building unity, and to focus on trying to build a different approach to the world that's much in line with the new international order, this multipolar world that more and more seeks the freedom from dominance, especially economic and financial dominance and monopolies that have been established since the 1990s by the West. I think a greater understanding of that and a more sensitive approach to dealing with other countries and other people make America more secure. Like I said, regardless of what happens, we're praying for a peaceful non-violence in the 2 days leading up to the election, after the election, and praying of a decisive victory, because if you don't have a decisive victory, you open up a hornet's nest of instability. And now that states are announcing that it could take days or perhaps even weeks to get election results, that's not a healthy message being sent to a very skeptical population in the United States. States. You know, it's difficult to explain how extremely large countries like India and like Brazil can have election results in the same day, but the United States cannot have election results for days and weeks. I think this needs to change for the better and for stability within the country. But with that, I thank you and hope to see you again soon, and look forward to our next conversation. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Obrad. God so bless. Excellent. Totally agree. Thank you so much, John. That was Ambassador Obrad Kesić of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the European Union. John Bosnitch, political commentator. Zoran Pilot out of Los Angeles, president and CEO of TeslaVision. Thank you so much for hosting us, Zoran. And myself, Angelina Lazar from Jordan, spiritual and political advisor and UN Peacemaker. Thanks so much, gentlemen. We continue tomorrow night, same time, 9 p.m. Pacific. That would be 11 p.m. Central and midnight Eastern Standard Time from Belgrade. That is 5 a.m. in the morning with a new panel of speakers. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Best and God bless.
Thank you.